Hello, everyone. I'm Susan McGrath, Professor Emerita at the Center for Refugee Studies at York University in Toronto and a member of the Refugee Research Network. And I'm pleased to welcome you to the third webinar in a series co-hosted by the Local Engagement Refugee Research Network, more commonly known as LERRN, and the Refugee Research Network on the ethics of forced migration research. With a growing understanding in the field of forced migration that it's important to do research differently, this series aims to build a community of practice of people dedicated to supporting ethical and relevant research and to share best practices on designing and conducting research. I want to acknowledge Rachel McNally, who has been organizing the event so effectively, and the team at LERRN for all their technical support. Today's webinar is titled Creative Methods in Challenging Times and is a pre-launch of an exciting book documenting displacement, questioning methodological boundaries in forced migration research. It's edited by Kasia Grabska and Christina Clark-Kazak. I've had the good fortune to read the book, and it is terrific. It is innovative and creative, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from selected authors today. It is our custom to start with a land acknowledgement. Since this meeting is being held online, a singular land acknowledgement does not capture the richness of our distribution across many locations in Canada and around the world. As the Refugee Research Network is hosted at York University in Toronto, we would like to share the land acknowledgement that is used at York, and we invite you to consider your own territory. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been taken care of by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. The Dish with One Spoon is an Indigenous hunting law used for centuries, and one spoon signifies that all people sharing the territory are expected to limit the game they take to leave enough for others. I invite us to reflect on this meeting and how it might inform our work and research. I'm pleased now to turn things over to Professor Christina Clark-Kazak at the School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa. Among her many roles, she's past president of the International Association of the Study of Forced Migration. She's a leading scholar in our field and co-editor of this amazing book. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank you to everyone who's joining us from all over the world. I especially want to acknowledge Susan, Danesh, and Shashini, Susan Banky, who are staying up very late in order to participate. So we recognize that this is not an ideal time zone for you, and we appreciate you joining us. So we have a very full agenda today. My role is simply to try to orchestrate this very innovative and exciting workshop. We're going to start with an overview from my co-editor, Kasia Grabska, who is a senior researcher at PRIO in Norway. And she's going to try to, in a very short time period, give us a brief overview of the book. This is a very rich book with 14 chapters, so we're not going to be able to do it justice in its fullness today, but Kasia will give us a brief overview. This will be followed by an innovative and interactive workshop by Susan Banky and Nicole Phillips, who are joining us from the University of Sydney. And they will demonstrate in action some of the tools that are profiled in their chapter in the book. This will be then followed by a presentation from Danesh Jayatikala and Shashini Gamaj, who are joining us from the Center for Migration and Development Studies in Sri Lanka. And they will be profiling their mobility video methodology. And finally, Dina Taha, who has a chapter on decolonizing knowledge and reflexivity, joining us from York University. She will give a discussant, it will be acting as a discussant, so give us some feedback on the chapters and introducing some of the decolonizing methodologies from her own chapter. So as you can see, it's a very full agenda. So I will turn it over to Kasia for the overview of the book.
All right, thank you very much, Christina, for the introduction. Thank you so much for the LERRN Network, for the invitation to present really, this is a pre-launch of the book. And thank you so much to Susan McGrath for, first of all, reading the book and secondly, opening today's webinar. So as Christina said, this is an extremely rich book with many chapters. I will not be able to discuss all of them and all the themes that we are addressing, but I wanted to give you first a bit of an idea of what a collaborative process it has been in these challenging times. And I think the fact that the whole book, we managed to put it together with the amazing authors, some of them are with us today, and thank you so much for your participation. But first of all, thank you so much for being incredible contributors over the past 2 years during the pandemics, really meeting the impossible deadlines and struggling through all the different moments to contribute to this book. So the publication of this book is also a tribute to all the amazing work that you all do as scholars, as activists, as engaged scholars, as researchers, as academics, and as you as human beings. So thank you from both of us, from Christina and me, because we couldn't have done this book without you and with this amazing effort that you put into it in these challenging times, as we say. I also wanted to mention that the cover of the book that you see, this comes from an installation, also a work that was donated to us, to the book, by a refugee artist, displaced artist, the Chilean artist, Marisa Cornejo. So as you can see, the book follows the collaborative, co-creative methods, not only in research, but also in its own presentation. So how did we come to this collection? Christina and I met at the International Association for the Study of Forced Migration biannual meeting in Thessaloniki in 2018. And we both have been working on the themes related to challenges relating to methods, methodologies, and ethics, and doing ethically sound and ethically informed research in the context of displacement, forced migration, and refugee studies. And we both felt that there was something more to be said, given the fact that there were so many incredible panels at the conference. Some of them, in fact, I co-organized with Cindy Horst. Others were co-organized by other colleagues. And in fact, some of the authors who participated in these panels ended up being authors in the book. So you see their contributions here. So the book comes from that encounter, and our interests emerge from our respective involvements in these debates related to methods and to the ethics, as I said. But the idea was also to open up this discussion in the field that, in a sense, we were questioning what type of codes of, what type of norms and codes of research should there be present in the field of displacement and refugee studies. And some of them, the Association for the Study of Forced Migration adopted, respectively. In 2018, for example, there was the Code of Ethics adopted. Now, if we can move to the next slide. Yes. So the contributions that you see in this book, they speak to ethics, methods, and knowledge production in displacement and refugee studies. Can we go back to that second slide? Yes. And what you see here are these incredible 14 chapters that present innovative, collaborative, extremely creative, and many of them are arts-based interdisciplinary methods. And we speak about interdisciplinarity. We have contributions that come from health studies, communication studies, anthropology, geography, sociology, and even computer science, as you will see one of the chapters. And authors in all these chapters reflect in a very honest and deep, profound way on the type of, not only on the type of methods that they've used and how they've used them, and what type of ethical considerations they employed their research, but also the type of lessons that they've learned. And they really took, honestly, from the perspective of both things that worked really well and those that didn't. What is also key to all the contributions is the attention that all of the authors pay to the unequal power relations, not only in the research itself, in the co-creation of knowledge, especially in such a field as refugee studies and forced migration studies, where we often work with populations in marginalized positions, but also how research itself creates these unequal power relations. And I'm sure that Dina will come back to it with some of her reflections on decolonizing knowledge and the kind of decolonizing narratives that she also discusses in the book. We also have key discussions around critical reflections on crossing disciplinary boundaries. And this is, I think, Susan Bamke and Nicole Phillips will show us this with the method that they are employing in their study of Bhutanese diaspora. But that's also the work of Shashini and Danash, who will talk about their mapping, visual methods, video methods, digitalization. So we can see how many different disciplinary boundaries are being crossed. And this also, they pose critical questions, not only about the need to cross these boundaries, but also how we cross them and to what extent this is possible. What we also see in these contributions, some of them are extremely precise about the need to acknowledge other ways of knowing. So not only through interviews, ethnographic work, but the type of embodied sensory experiences that so often have been completely absent from refugee displacement studies so far. And these are, we'll show you a very short example of this work in a second. And lastly, the book also shows the diversity of contributions. So first of all, geographically, we have contributions from Sudan, from Sri Lanka, from the Bhutanese diaspora living across the world, from Canada, from Europe, from Bangladesh, from Ethiopia, from Egypt. So really, you see from Colombia. So we really cover pretty much all the continents. And then also differently positioned researchers. We have junior researchers, more senior researchers, researchers working as academics, but also activists, also professionals in their own fields coming together and having this conversation in the book. And as we said, the different disciplinary diversity that we see in the book. So can we go to the next slide? Now, as I said, the ethical commitments and the co-creation of knowledge in documenting displacement is at the core of the book. And what we see here is the type of innovative and empathetic ways in which the authors develop in their chapters of engaging with the experiences of displacement, collective experiences and individual experiences. And I think what is key to all the chapters is how seriously authors take that responsibility to create research that acknowledges hierarchy in the research production process, but also how they, through their multiple ethical considerations and different methods, try to find ways in which research will not exacerbate these inequalities. And I think what is the other aspect that we need to stress in this book, an incredible contribution from everybody, is the type of research practice that we are proposing through the different chapters. And that's not the only research practice, of course, but this is the contribution to the debates around the ethical research practice in forced migration displacement studies that we are proposing, that is really grounded in relational ethics of care and solidarity. Can we move to the next slide? I will not go through all the chapters, but I just wanted to say the book is divided into 3 sections. The first section deals more directly with issues around ethics, power, and knowledge. How, and here the authors pay attention to diverse ways of producing knowledge, the kind of working with community-based researchers and how we work together through all the stages, including writing up, and how to create different ethical and methodological approaches, working as insiders, and how to cross these boundaries of working with arts-based methods. And please go to the next slide. The next section focuses mainly on arts-based collaborative methods and how we can reimagine displacement research differently. So here we have different contributions from the sound postcards to working with graffitis, to working with film, photography, and then participatory collage installation methods. And the next slide, please. And the third section addresses, here we find chapters that address really crossing the methodological and disciplinary boundaries, from people who work in computer science, working with simulation, to those who come up with multimedia package approaches. So this is Susan Banky and Nicole Phillips. You'll hear about their method in a second. To Sashimi and Danish and their memory maps and video stories that we will hear about in a second. And digitalization, kind of different types of narratives that are being produced through the project. So the last slide, please. As you can see, this is an extremely rich collection. And what I would propose to do now is to show you an example of one of the methods that we found really pushing boundaries, disciplinary boundaries, but also something that we haven't really seen that much used in this displacement research is the use of sound postcards. So this is the work of Andrea Rodriguez Sanchez and Miguel Alonso Cambron. So here you see the use of the sound postcards. The participants in this research were asked to reproduce sound and find sound that will correspond to their experiences before displacement in Colombia. And then they were asked to produce sound postcards that will correspond to their experience after the displacement. So here we're going to hear very briefly, maybe we can hear half a minute of the sound postcard before forced displacement.
We're not hearing the sound.
We cannot hear it.
So maybe in the interest of time, we'll leave this to the end so that we can get the technology working, because I recognize that we have a full agenda. Kasia, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we move to the next?
No, I just wanted to invite everybody to read the book, to discover our incredible authors. And now I wanted to give the floor to Susan and Nicole to introduce their chapter.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to LERRN. Thank you so much to Kasia and Christina for being terrific, patient, steadfast editors, and it must be said, choralers, to get us all into this book and into this Zoom room. I'm delighted to be here to talk a little bit about our chapter. I have seen it as a collaborative process, so really along the way, I did have a chance to know a little bit about what else was in the book, but not as fully and complete a picture as you have just given, Kasia. And it's lovely to see what my colleagues are doing in this very same book. It makes me all the more excited and honored that Nicole and I have the chance to be in it. I just wanted to start by saying a few things about our approach, and then we're just going to jump in with this kind of innovative method that we thought we would try. So MMP is an innovative approach that addresses the problems of over-research. That's why the name of our chapter is Overcoming Over-Research. Anyone that's in the Zoom room today will know that refugee populations are often over-researched, especially ones in camps or in encamped settings that those from the global north find easy to access. And so it is certainly over-research is a problem in many populations, but we can't neglect the fact that it's quite an issue in the field that we care about so much. And rather than just doing no harm, we thought that it would be cool to have research be enjoyable or whimsical. So this is an approach based on what's called the cultural probe method in design studies. If there was ever a terrible marketing label for an approach, it would be that. I mean, I think cultural probe really is not what we want to be doing with people. I don't think it really fully encompasses the ideas that we're hoping for. But the idea is to bring up the themes that we're trying to get across in, as I said, enjoyable and whimsical ways. And Nicole and I wanted to research for this particular study we were doing, research the views of home and homeland for what we call a triple diaspora resettled population. And this was the population of Bhutanese refugees who have resettled to third countries. These are people for whom their ancestors left Nepal and moved to Bhutan. Then they fled to Nepal following a crisis in Bhutan in the early 1990s. And then in the mid 2000s, many of them resettled to countries of the global north. And so the question we wanted to ask in the context of that triple diaspora was, where is home and what does it look like? And again, based on this cultural probe method, we took some of those ideas and we brought them forward. And rather than talk to you about it, I think we're going to try it. We're gonna have you participate in it. To my mind, never been done at a book launch, and I'm really excited to try. So I want to make sure that everyone can see this now. I believe you all can. And I'm now going to move to the very first page. Nope, I'm not going to move to the first page. Hold on. Good. Okay. So the first part of the MMP method is trying to get the participants to understand or communicate geographically places that are of interest to them. And so what we did is we gave them a map quite similar to this and asked them to mark on the map certain places that had particular meanings for them. And so we're going to actually ask all of you, or however many of you want to participate, to do the same. And what I would like to ask anyone that wants to is to click a check where you are now. Don't be shy. I don't see anything, which either tells me that no one wants to participate or we've done something wrong.
Whenever I stamp something, it gets erased.
Huh. That
It's
is
weird.
super frustrating.
Yeah, because we
This is-
even pre-tested this, right, Susan?
Yeah. Oh, that is right. Quite upsetting. The idea here was supposed to be that we all put our marks on this screen. I wonder whether other things would work. Nothing is working. I wonder if we have too many people. Well, look, I'm really disappointed this didn't work. We did test it, but I can still tell you what we were going to do. Nicole and I can still tell you what we were going to do. And you can imagine what this fabulous screen would have looked like with all of your participation, as sad as it is.
It might be helpful to use the chat feature instead.
Yep, that's a great idea. So for this one, and you can just look at this map and now visualize what would have happened, is we were asking you all to put a checkbox where you live now. And one can just imagine the way that the screen would have just, we hope, filled up with checkboxes, certainly from looking around Australia, Sri Lanka, Canada, Italy, just from the people I know in the room, the United States. I know that it would have been this lovely kind of array of checks. Then we were going to ask you to put a star where you were from, and what we imagined being a group of researchers who study migration. We imagined that these stars would have differed from those checkboxes. Then we were going to ask you all to add a heart for a place about which you have strong emotions. This could be a place of your ancestry, or a place where you have worked, or a place that you care deeply about. And I think at the end of that, what we would have seen is a beautiful array of patterns across the world that would have allowed people to contemplate what is an emotional attachment to a place and what does home look like. Very sad that that's not what happened. But anyway, that was our first plan. Nicole, I'll hand it over to you for the next slide.
Yeah, I'm definitely loving all the interaction within the chat feature and seeing so many other countries and cities representing from the questions that Susan just asked. So that's really great to see. In addition to the map exercise for the multimedia package, we also asked, we had a number of prompting cards that we sent to our participants. And so I thought that we can go through a few of them and everybody can use the chat feature to write their responses. So write how you feel when you think about your hometown or homeland. It can be a word or two or a sentence. I'll give everybody a minute. Friendship, beauty, nostalgic, treasured, parents, family, noisy and loud, mad energy, social support, mixed feelings, not belonging. So you can see that there's an array of feelings when people think about their homeland or home country, and then also using the map exercise. To everyone, it can be different. It's not necessarily the place that they were born or grew up in. Warmth, friends, yes, parents. This is great. And let's go to the next one.
I'm trying to move my screen and it is now not being cooperative. There it is. What do family members do that remind you of your hometown or homeland? Again, what we were hoping to do, and best laid plans, was to actually have you writing your text right here in the screen. And what you would have seen, what we were hoping for, is that the screen would have just filled up your words with your words of the things that your family do that kind of have that. But please keep putting it in the chat where I see it's cook local food, speaking a language. Hi, Michaela. Conversation, food, of course, food. This is so funny. Cook, speak loudly, never say please. Yes, I would expect that, Lou. That's awesome. Songs. Oh, that's a great one. Poetry. Jokes from childhood. That's great. Lydia, where are you from? I want to know where the jokes from childhood are. Prayers, beautiful. Ukraine. These are terrific. Now, what you may be asking yourself, oh, the smell of bread. See, I'm hungry. It's 1 a.m. here and now I want to eat bread. You may be telling yourself, well, this is a mush. This is like a hodgepodge. And if we put this all on one prompting card, like how would we even be able to process it? But there is a method to this madness, because the point of this exercise, when we collect the information, is not to use the answers that we are collecting from you right now are not actually the way that we collect data in the MMP. This is, as we just called it, a prompt, which is to say this essentially creates a catalyst. It puts participants and respondents in a whimsical and enjoyable mood and wants them to be able to think about their hometown. So, for example, Shadin here has mentioned the smell of bread. It's not that we would then take the text smell of bread and use that. It's when we come back together after having given our participants their prompting cards and seeing those answers, we would then sit down with each participant and say, tell me more about the smell of bread. So what you see here is that what you might perceive as a little bit of chaos is really the lubricant to get people in the mood for talking and sharing. I'll go to the next one for Nicole to ask the question. Is that going to work? Yes, there we go.
Yeah, and a lot of people mentioned food already in the chat, so this is the perfect transitional one. So what food reminds you of your hometown or homeland? If you can use the chat feature for this as well. Samosas, bread dumplings. This is definitely making me very hungry and it sounds amazing. Arepa, laksa, fajitas, everything sounds so delicious. And then when again, thinking about the prompting nature of these. So how does that make you feel? Thinking about, is that something that, that you had growing up? Something that your mum made? Is that something that you continue to make or eat now? So lots of different ways to continue that conversation. And when we sat down with the participants and really explored their responses to these.
And I will say
Yes,
that
please,
today,
love that. Sorry.
I will say that today is not, we are not talking about the results, like what we sort of learned from these Bhutanese refugees. We're just talking about the methods. But what I can tell you is that for this population, much of what we were able to draw out is that different aspects of people's lives sort of came into stark relief when they thought about their homeland as either Bhutan or Nepal, and potentially with the younger generation, in fact, the resettlement country. Okay, the next one, not sure how well it's going to work, but we can give it a go. It was to draw a doodle of your earliest memory. Now, again, we were hoping that people would be able to do that right here on the chat. But I think that is, I mean, to draw it right here on this card. So the other possibility, if you happen to have a pen and paper handy, is you could draw something and just hold up a little doodle on your screen. That might not work, but we could try it. I'm turning off the share in case there's anybody that has a pen and paper. I just realized like nobody has a pen and paper anymore. So I mean, I have a pen, but I don't have any paper. I don't know where to doodle. So we may have to pass that one up. But what I will say is this is once again a different way to draw out people. Some people it might appeal to them more to think about the food or the dancing or the smell of bread or whatever it is. And for some people, it could be just a little doodle. Nicole, what was the drawing that someone included of the Bhutanese Buddhist symbol?
I'm not sure, but the doodles varied greatly from their classroom in Bhutan to a bunch of different things, and varying in how good the drawings were, which obviously it wasn't a critique on anybody's drawing ability, because that would but really to use it in the conversation and explore and ask questions about what they drew.
Yeah. And then the last one that we're going to do here today was, and this was the one that the only one that was supposed to be in the chat, was to write 2 things you have done recently that connect you to your hometown or your homeland. So if you could put that in the chat, that would be great.
And then during the project, we gave everybody notebooks to use to write for to respond to a number of different questions. And so this is one of the ones that we had.
As you're all playing sitar, this is so cool. As you're all answering this, what I will add to what Nicole just said is that we decided to try this online because it was cool for an online launch. The way that we did it in real life is that we had all of these materials, like sort of hard materials. We sent them to the participants, and then we met with them, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later, giving them instructions. So they had some time to kind of write on the prompting cards when they wanted. They had time to put little stickers on an actual map. They wrote in their logbook. And then the one we didn't include here is that they had a USB in which they could put different things like images, a video of someone telling a joke. Are you laughing at these terrific answers, Nicole?
They're amazing. And I was, yeah, definitely thinking of more the video chats and FaceTiming have been major themes, especially as we're thinking of in the time of COVID and people not being able to go back.
So that actually concludes the portion of this where we share things. Quite frustratingly, that didn't work. And note to self, I don't know how you retest something like that because it all worked well the last 2 times. But I hope that this gave all of you a taste of the way that we try to create some whimsy and joy with our participants. In the chapter, what we write about is that having done lots of different kinds of creative methods, we did determine that this was a method that was enjoyable for our participants and that we believe we should be used again. We caution against thinking that it's the panacea, because just like any other method, if overused, it becomes just something burdensome. Part of the appeal of the approach is that it is new and innovative, and we are sensitive to that. But I have to say, having tried it with our testing group 2 days ago, Nicole and I now want to actually try an online version, but clearly we need to work out some of the technical problems. But I hope that gives all of the participants an idea of what we were trying to achieve. And we're actually early, but I'm really eager to just hear other people and their methods as well. So thanks for everyone's attention.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Nicole and Susan, not only for an interactive workshop, but also for taking the risk of doing something different. We all felt that all of us are suffering from Zoom fatigue, so it was very exciting to try it. And I also think this is a part of research, right? You pre-test something, everything works, and then you get there and it's like, what? Why is this not working, right? So I think this gives us a really good taste of it, and I'm sure there's questions. We are going to hold everything for the end because we do have such a rich array of presentations. And I also noticed that a number of our other contributors have joined. So I'm hoping that in the discussions, they will also be able to answer and interact with the participants. So I think it's great that we ended this part a little bit early. So I will turn it over now to Dinesh and Shashini for their presentation on the video mapping.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Katsia. Thanks to my colleague Shashini, who worked on this study with me. So this was a project that was conducted in 2016 to 18 in Colombo. It was with Sussex, University of Sussex. And it was a umbrella research called Migrants on the Margins. And the particular project was called Unknown City, the visibility and invisibility of urban displacement. And what we were trying to do was we were looking at scales of individual, household level, community, and the city, because we felt that there were implications from each level to another, and to understand one layer was not enough. So there were actually 14 techniques that were being tried. Some of them were tested, and in Sri Lanka, it was a multi-country study. We actually did all of them. And there were surveys, oral histories, walks, cartoons, mappings, video mappings, stories, comics, yeah, everything. And so in relation to our discussion today, so we had 4 sites in Colombo. They were all underserved communities, which sometimes we call them slums. And they were, from them, we selected 500 households for a survey. This survey and the instrument itself was ethically reviewed, both at Sussex and in Colombo. And from that 500, we selected 50 people as a second layer for oral histories, long interviews. That instrument itself was also ethically reviewed, both at Sussex and Colombo. And from that 50, we selected again some best candidates for techniques like Rambler walks and the video mapping. And here, they were, when we selected, I think we selected 8, and there were, maybe Sashini can correct it, 8, of which 6 were male and 2 were female. Of course, the selection was quite difficult because you had to find someone who was comfortable with it, and they were sort of okay for the technique that Sashini was going to try. And so there was a lot of back and forth going between the researchers and these respondents. And once they were okay with it, we actually did some pre-testing. We did some pre-trials of getting them to draw, and then Sashini looked at it, etc. And then once they were, then we got their consent. We informed them about what the techniques is, what it's going to do, how it's going to be done, and what will happen afterwards. That was their informed consent. And then we moved into the process itself. Yes, I think that should cover it, and I'll let Sashini take over on how exactly the method happened.
Thanks so much, Danesh, for that. And I really had fun working on this project with you. So thank you so much. And Kasia and Christina, thanks for this opportunity as well. You've been wonderful editors of the book as well. So just following up on Danesh's introduction to the project, and for the mobility videos is what we call them because they're very much linked to place and how journeys of displacement have been sort of embedded in people's memories. So we are calling them mobility videos because we want to link place in particular in relation to memory, and how displacement is quite linked to memory and maps and places. So I'm reflecting here on what Susan was talking about earlier in regards to maps as well. So before I sort of start my presentation, maybe Richard could play the video a little bit. So maybe 2.5 minutes of one of the videos that we've sort of selected, and then I would move into my presentation after that.
என் பேர் ராதிகா. நான் இலங்கையில் பிறந்தேன். மலையகத்தில் ஹட்டனில் 1981 ஹட்டனில் அப்கட்டில் பிறந்தேன். 2001 வரைக்கும் நான் ஸ்கூல் போனேன். அதில் தான் ஸ்கூல் லீவ் ஆனது. ஸ்கூல் லீவ் ஆகி அதிலேருந்து நான் கொழும்பு வந்தேன். 2001 கொழும்புல கிராண்ட் பாஸில் ஒர்க்குக்கு வந்தேன். நான் வகம்புரையில் 5 ஸ்டார்ன்ற கவர்மெண்ட்டில் ஸ்டோர் கீப்பர்.
Yeah, so that's the general idea of the video. So and I hope that gives you a sense of like how it was sort of produced. So it's basically someone narrating their journey and narrating it through sort of places and what they remember from living in so many different places within a few years. So it's pretty much about sort of urban displacement, and that's the sort of idea of capturing that urban displacement through memory. So I'm just going to do a screen share so that I can share my slides. Yeah, so when I sort of designed the presentation, I thought like this image would sort of capture the kind of urbanness of Colombo, which is like through the tuk-tuks, which is very sort of a symbol of urbanization and the informal sort of economy that we have circulating here in Colombo. So the tuk-tuks sort of remind us of urbanness, which also sort of masks and sort of hide the kind of displacement that you have in cities. So cities can easily sort of hide the kind of displacement that we have. So it's displacement is not only sort of about distant places or remote sort of villages, but very much in the cities as well. So that is what we were, I guess, trying to capture from the videos when we were doing the memory mapping activity. So with the mobility videos, I guess what we wanted to achieve was to record some of these stories of urban displacement, and we wanted to explore particularly memory as particularly tied to a place and a space. So like I said before, like we call these mobility videos because they are journeys of displacement and tied to geographies, memories, mapped through a geographical maps which these participants draw up themselves. So as you saw, there are some prominent features of these videos. So hand drawings, narrations, visuals, subtitles for English audiences, and there's music. And it's very much a video project. So you need to have some sort of audience engagement through visualization. But we were very much sort of aware of the kinds of ethical considerations that we had to sort of look at when we are producing something visual from narratives and something that is linked to displacement and memory. So how do we then harness, or how do we capture the kind of memories that people have in their cognitive sort of faculties, and how do we capture them into sort of visuals and bring them into an audience so that someone looking at those videos could understand the kind of displacement that these people went through. So that was the sort of general exercise. So these links would actually take you to some of the other videos if you want to sort of look at them later on as well. In the book, in our chapter, like we discussed 3 kinds of main sort of ways of recording these memories, which we sort of brought together in this video. So we have the life story narratives, we have the memory maps, and of course the video story itself. So those are the 3 kind of sort of ways of storytelling that we are focusing on in our videos. So combining these different kinds of storytelling formats, we were able to sort of capture these migration histories and journeys of displacement that our participants had experienced. So they, like Danesh mentioned earlier, like they all lived in underserved neighborhoods in Colombo, which we sometimes tend to call slums, but we prefer to use the word underserved neighborhoods because it's less kind of stereotypical. Sort of when you say underserved neighborhoods, it doesn't sort of blame the participants who are living in those sort of neighborhoods for the conditions that they're experiencing. So we prefer the term underserved neighborhoods because of that. And yeah, so they very much sort of the participants that we featured in the videos, they come from displacement backgrounds due to ethnic riots, civil war, and they've been working in informal economies like tea estates in the center of the country. So they've sort of migrated into these settlements for maybe employment and school, and to sort of find better jobs or sort of better opportunities in the city. And our participants in the videos are all minority Tamils, which made them particularly vulnerable to conditions that the civil war created for them in Sri Lanka as well. So that is also something that we were aware of when we were doing the videos. So as you can see, like they were very much the participants telling their stories in the way that they wanted, and we were just sort of conscious of the choices that they wanted to make and how they wanted to tell the story, rather than us directing them about sort of what to say or what to do. So they were just simple instructions. We had a trial, like Danish said earlier, but they were given simple instructions like drawing up a map, marking the locations, whatever milestone that you come across or remember, just mark them in the map. And we would just record them throughout as they told their stories and as they drew the map. So it's not very easy as well to sort of draw something and sort of keep narrating as well, but we found the participants were sort of doing it really well in terms of drawing the sort of maps and also telling the story at the same time. So they followed the instructions and they were happy to sort of share some things about their journeys. So usually sort of in video sort of formats, it's very difficult to de-identify participants. There are sort of ways of doing it, like blurring the faces or masking the voices of the participants and putting them under sort of a very bad lighting sort of environments or something like that. But we try to sort of use instead just their hands, sort of videographing their hands so that they are de-identified. And we found that it's important to have this de-identification because some of these participants came from a lot of sort of backgrounds of trauma, and they've sort of undergone things like civil war and sort of violence and jails, spending time in jails through migration, sort of things like that. So we found that it's important, after consulting with the participants, that a de-identification was an important step in the process as well. So that's why sort of we selected this particular sort of format for the videos. And so the mobility videos were definitely designed with that idea that trauma was at the core of their previous experiences and present lives. So we wanted to sort of collaborate them in a way that they were comfortable with in terms of revealing what they wanted to tell us. So silences were important sort of aspects of these videos. So if they wanted to withdraw some information, or if they wanted to not reveal any information, we would not sort of take over that. So silence was an important part of letting them sort of withdraw information. So it's what they wanted to sort of reveal about their journeys that we were sort of going to accept through the videos. Yeah, so we worked with a team of sort of video producers from the development communication sector, and we also sort of, so we had the participants and we had the researchers who was part of the Unknown City project working together as well. So that's the sort of collaboration that we collaboration that happened over the video. So it was each sort of a different person having a different role and taking advantage of the sort of creative knowledge and faculties that they already had with them. So for the participants, drawing, writing, things that they were comfortable doing. So the videographers would do the technical side of things, and then the researchers had a rapport and a sort of a trust built in the community. So they would collaborate with the participants in sort of building trust and like getting informed consent and sort of talking to participants through the process. So that was how the videos were done technically. So those three groups of people working together, the participants, the researchers, and the video team doing the production work and the technical work as well. We sort of developed these videos because we wanted to show them at a sort of, which we did, like at exhibitions and workshops, and we really sort of put these videos and these participants in connection with policymakers. So that was sort of creating kind of political listening for the standardized sort of videos that we were producing. Like we were actually like kind of like standardizing the stories, which was a limitation of this format, but we try to sort of mediate that by creating some sort of political listening, by creating workshops, exhibitions and blogs and archives and things like that, so that the videos would be linked to some sort of development sector workers or policymakers who would take this data as stories or narratives of urban displacement. Yeah, so
Sorry oh, great. I was just going to
Yeah,
say.
so that's the last slide. Yeah, so I just have the links there again. So I hope like you would further explore the narratives and have a bit of look at the other stories and how they shape as well. And we welcome any questions about them. So thank you so much for this opportunity once again, and thanks everyone for listening as well.
Thank you so much, Sasuni and Dinesh. And we will have time for questions at the end. This is why I'm kind of trying to stay quite strict to the time. So I know that Andrea Rodriguez has joined us, and because we didn't get to hear her sound postcard earlier, I'm just going to ask whether we can ask Andrea to turn on her camera, and Rachel, if it's possible to show the sound postcard, and then Andrea, if you wanted to just give a quick commentary on it afterwards.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. And yes, we create this methodology with other colleague from Spain called Miguel Alfonso Cambron. He started this methodology in Barcelona with a research group, but in other way. And we adapt this methodology for ask young people and children and their families about the forces displaced situation, and in most direct point about how the violence changed their social fabric. So we use the sounds for us these changes, and we ask about 3 moments of this situation before of the violence, or before of the displacement, the forced displacement, after the forced displacement, and how they recognize these sounds in the musical space, because I study in my PhD about how a musical space can help the people to recover the social fabric. You can hear in this website these three moments of the people before, after the forced displacement, and we ask about the sounds, the landscapes, the environment, and we looking for the bonds, or how these sounds show us the changes in their social fabric. So in this moment, we can hear this sound postcard. This is a postcard after the forced displacement, and well, you can see more in this website, and after in other book launch we can explain more about the theory that support this methodology.
El río, sí recuerdo un río grande, sonaba muy duro. Recuerdo pues el sonido del bus y el aire acondicionado. Eso es lo único que recuerdo. También recuerdo que había gente comiendo adelante de nosotros, como que... Los paquetes. Nada más. Muchos carros pitando. Casi se acaban con el pito. Los pasos que da la gente.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing the postcard and for coming. We'll have time for people to ask questions in just a few minutes. But I think that this really shows the innovative methods of the sound postcard. And I also think it shows how it can be linked with some of the other methods that have been shown in terms of the MMP and also the video narratives. So I'm now going to invite Dina Taha to do the unenviable task of trying to pull together some of the threads and introduce the discussion part of today's workshop.
Yes, thank you so much, Christina, for inviting me over. And it's fascinating. Like, you've been involved in this project for 2 years. You see it from a very narrow perspective, and then things are coming together, and we hear other authors and contributors, and it just struck me how Christina and Kasia have done an amazing job, like building this collage of work and fitting it together. So I'm not planning on speaking for too long, and I don't have slides, but I intend to just give a very quick overview of what my chapter talks about and try to link it to those art-based methods. And then I have a couple of questions that maybe all the authors and contributors can reflect on. So I have to admit, I am a bit jealous because my chapter focuses on a very traditional method of collecting data, qualitative interviews. So it's amazing to see how, like, there are endless ways to collect data. And so in my chapter, I focus on critical reflexivity specifically, and some ethical, methodological, and theoretical principles that can help us explore how critical reflexivity can explore decolonizing research and avoid further marginalizing other non-Western, non-hegemonic narratives and worldviews. I touch on concepts or principles such as reciprocity, embracing other ways of knowing, but also some nuanced methodological considerations such as the length of quotes. So I use lengthy quotes, or translation considerations. But most importantly, there was this constant reflection on questions such as, is my research grounded in binaries? Are my questions, like my interview questions, promoting polarized either or stereotypical images or perceptions? And above all, am I further marginalizing those perceptions? And in some instances, which I reflect on in the chapter, I actually do. So I focus on 3 stories in this chapter. Without going into details, the first one, I demonstrate how critical reflexivity has shown me how I was trying to gain too much control and impose my own academic agenda that's influenced by hegemonic Western conceptions on the respondent, who didn't let me, and thankfully so. And then the other example, it goes in the other extreme, where I was interviewing a man, a very charismatic man embodying hegemonic masculinity, and I lose control of my, like, the epistemology of the research for a very primitive form of gender divide. And then I reflect on the third example of how those 2 examples have given me experience to learn when to let go and when to try to gain control of the interview. And what I wanted to demonstrate here is that critical reflexivity reveals both the researcher ideological bias and preconceived conceptions, which are, no matter what we do, are still going to be there. But it also reveals the researcher vulnerability and when to embrace it and when to be okay with it. So that's just a quick overview, but it makes me wonder, because I had to involve critical reflexivity throughout the different stages of the research, collecting data, analyzing data, design. It seems that the art-based methods that Dinesh, Shashini, Susan and Andrea showed us, it gives more control to the respondent or the participant. But I'm still curious, like you were still involved in designing the study, in designing the art activities that they were involved in. So I was wondering how you were able to include critical reflexivity in those stages before and after collecting the data. I would be curious to hear from you if you faced similar considerations, such as showing your own vulnerability or wrestling with your own vulnerability in throughout the research process, and did you have to let go a little bit more, or did you have to change the trajectory of your research design a little bit based on the input from the respondents? And I would also like to hear if you had, if during exercising critical reflexivity at any point where if you were able to find or realize that you had your preconceived or ideological biases have actually dictated how this research was designed, and how did you deal with it? So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that, and I'm excited to hear your responses. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here and speak.
Thank you so much, Dina. So you've given us a lot to think about. We are going to open now up the question and answer period. There have been 2 other questions in the chat also, so I just want to maybe collect those along with Dina's thoughts. So James Milner asked a question about the policy implications of the methodologies and whether or not these methodologies could be used to inform policy discussions. And there was also a comment, which I kind of added a question to from Susan Banky about thinking about perhaps combining or interlinking some of these methods. And those are added to the questions that Dina has just posed about reflexivity and control, and also about bias, ideological and epistemological bias. So, so we'll just start with those 4. Please feel free to add other questions in the chat. And I also noticed that a number of our other contributors are present today. So I've looked in the list. I'm sorry if I've missed anyone, but I see Michaela, Adnan, Nihal, Erica, Jose, Aza. So if any of the other contributors would like to join in. James is saying that his question was specifically to Shashini and Dinesh. I understand that, James, but I am actually trying to open it up to see if anyone else also wants to. I'm using my prerogative as chair to try to have more of an conversation or dialogue across the different contributions, because I think this is one of the challenges, but also opportunities of edited volumes is you have a wide range of perspectives. So I would like to invite, first of all, Shashini and Dinesh to comment because there was one question directed specifically to you. And if you also want to address any of the other questions, then I'll turn it to Susan and Nicole, and anyone else who would like to join in from the contributors, please feel free to raise your hand so then I can see that you would like to come in. So Shashini and Dinesh, I'll turn it over to you first.
Dinesh, do you have anything to add first, or?
You can go first and then I'll answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So thanks, James, for the question. So I think like the point of doing the videos is also to sort of create this kind of engagement with sort of development practitioners and getting them sort of to come out of their comfort zones and really see like what was happening in the sort of the neighborhoods that we were sort of going and sort of experiencing as researchers, as media practitioners. So it was to sort of connect the 2 sort of communities together. So the researchers and the sort of people in the research circles or development circles or policymakers with the participants who are in the underserved settlements, and really to sort of tell people about urban displacement, and especially because it was a time in Sri Lanka when a lot of urban sort of restructuring was happening right after the war. So there was a lot of elicitation and sort of people were being moved out of their homes to make way for like urban development projects. So that was the sort of environment at that time. So we wanted to sort of give, I guess, a message about the sort of realities or what people were actually going through in the neighborhood. So like someone said earlier, I think it was Susan, so we don't know whether it's we could sort of claim it as a panacea, or like whether sort of it influenced policy in a different way to any other sort of a way. But we definitely feel like we were able to sort of tell these stories and bring them out to an audience who were sort of excluded, or who had sort of didn't engage as much as we had with the participants. So that connection or that communication was what I guess we created. And maybe Danish, you have a point to add there? Or?
Yeah, then we can maybe answer Dina's. Like Sashini said, I mean, the project itself was, we were trying to all understand how these migrants perceived their world, how they actually understood it. And so this was an important technique. The second was that visibility, invisibility part, because the profiles of the people we studied, they had those who had legal tenure, those who had illegal tenure, they had something in between, they had some other type, etc. And so there were places where they wanted to stay invisible, and sometimes it's not the whole person, maybe parts of the person or some aspect of their life, or some people wanted to be visible, maybe again on selective areas. So like Sashini said, sensitizing policymakers to this sort of, scenario, they don't know about it. So, we had these rich stories, and we had workshops, and we showed them their life stories. This is how it goes, and what's happened to them, on how they're moving, and the incidents they've had, etc., and etc. And we kept showing. I think it's a long-term process, and it's difficult because of how the projects are structured and people. But yeah, we tried to make overtures towards policymakers. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll ask Nicole and Susan to come in on one of the other questions, maybe that Dina raised around reflexivity and who has control, and whether you had to give up control, and those kinds of questions.
Yeah, I thought, Susan, you're on mute. Oh, for the interview section post the multimedia package and going through, I think with dealing with over-researched populations at first, they had control in, like, it felt like they were just telling me what I wanted to hear as a researcher, because they've done it before, they know what researchers want to hear, and they're saying that. But really what Susan and I tried to do, and our purpose was really for them to have the narrative of the conversation, because it was about their connection to their homeland, if it was Bhutan, Nepal, or the US. So it really wasn't up to us to have that control, but it did take a little bit of chiseling to get to the point where they were being more honest and weren't just telling us what we wanted to hear.
Also, first, I just want to say that I enjoyed all of these presentations so enormously. Dina, I look forward to reading them all. But because I'm answering your question now, Dina, I really look forward to reading yours. I love how you self-reflected on these moments of power and your position in them, and where you strayed even while you were thinking, like how you got sort of co-opted by your own, by socialization. So I love that. One thing we did do is we knew we wanted the method, and we knew we wanted it to be something about the homeland, but we were actually quite open to what kind of way the question would go. And one thing we did is we did work with a community member who highlighted the issues of importance to him. Now, let's be honest, he was a gatekeeper. There's colonization even in gatekeeping, so we know we didn't get it perfectly. I think some of your questions are terrific, and I think there's a lot more that we could have done, for example, in the analysis that might have offered more decolonization of our thinking, more reflexivity. This doesn't quite answer your question, but I think you'll know why I'm saying it. The USB was not a good idea. It definitely excluded parts of the population. It excluded the elderly. It alienated certain members who might not have been tech savvy. And we made some inappropriate assumptions about how youth might be able to help their parents, and that's inappropriate. I mean, we know as migration researchers, there are intergenerational either tensions or pressures that means that we were not as mindful of some of those dynamics as we could have been. And as we know, there's always room for improvement on those excellent questions that you asked. I do want to say that I really do think there's a value in whimsy and joy. And so I'm not saying that you can do any research just because it's whimsical and joyful, but it delights me so much to know that our participants enjoyed the process. It makes you never want to do research that isn't joyful again, which only half answers your question, but thank you for it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask Andrea to come in on this in just 1 minute, but I wanted I'm not sure if he's spotlighted yet, but Adnan is one of the peer researchers who worked on the chapter with Anna Oda, Michaela Hinia, and others. And I think it's the questions that Dina asked are very interesting and relevant to their chapter. So Adnan, would you like to respond to the question maybe around ideological and epistemological bias and how you address that within a community-based peer researcher context?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Christina, and thank you so much. It's a wonderful workshop, and it's good to see old friends. So back to your question, Dina. It's a very challenging question, and I did community-based research. I have the privilege to teach community-based research. It's always a challenge for us as peer researchers to be in this situation, either to be a researcher or doing research or being a community member. And your question, I'm very interested also about your question about the ideological biases and doing research, because that will reflect on your analysis, and specifically when you live with the narrative or where the narrative or the data of specific participants who you might agree or disagree with, and how you might situate the findings within the overall themes that you have organized or emerged from your data. It's always a challenge. It's always for me personally, especially with working with war refugees, you know, the ideological perspectives, you enter their lives, you enter their homes, and you listen to their stories. And in some cases, you might agree or disagree, but by the end of the day, you are a researcher. And the way you put your data, it's will reflect on your findings. And I have to say, also, it's different when you have a qualitative versus quantitative data. I'm also very grateful that you raised the issue about vulnerability, and especially in my own work, when I work with refugee men, refugee fathers who share their vulnerability, and they keep saying, you know, what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying. With Muslim refugees also, with Muslim women who also talk about their vulnerability as women who are in a community, especially in our context in Quebec, where Muslim women are systemically, clearly discriminated by the new law. It's not an easy situation to be an insider and outsider at the same time. But by the end of the day, we are researchers. Our goal is to deliver a high quality of data. I have to say, this is, in some cases, it's personal skills, I'd say. It's hard to enter your data or to read your data with a free bias, but it's as much as you do research, as much as you do, you collect data, you come to a conclusion that you are doing the research, and by the end of the day, you are informing policymakers. You're not changing the world. This is why I used to say to students who work in community-based research. This is what I have to say. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused, and not confused, and organized, because the question came as, and it triggered many memories in terms of working with refugees. And I'm in my last stage of writing my discussion, so it also made me think about my own discussion now on doing a research with community members. Thank you so much, and it's good to see you, Susan. It's good to see your name, Michaela, and it's good to see you, Christina and Dina and others.
Thank you so much. And thank you for, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I thought that you had particular perspectives that deserve to be highlighted. This is the challenge with this book. It's so rich and there's so many contributors. So Andrea, I will give you the last word before we wrap up. If you have anything else you want to add.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for the questions. Yes, I am thinking about it, and I think it's very important and it's very useful for these questions, maybe when the research is in, I don't know, in a context who we are part. And in this sense, we know more about the context, we understand maybe better some situations. And in this way, we can understand more or feeling more closer with the problematic or with the different roots of the situations. And I think in this point, the methodologies are very important, because when we choose methodologies that provide unconventional data, force us to think in new categories. And I think this is very useful to construct new ideas and new ways. And at the same time, these methodologies maybe are important for allow the people to feel protagonists and even creators. So I think with these elements we can find other ways, and we can be more critical and reflect more about our ideological and epistemological backgrounds. I think so.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Andrea. So I think that has summarized, it's a good place to end because I think you really brought all of the themes of today's workshop together. I'm sorry, we are going to have to close it there in interest of time. So I wanted to close by thanking McGill Queen's University Press for having published the book. Jonathan Crago is on the call today, so thank you very much for all your support. I also want to thank all the contributors who came today, but also those who are not yet profiled, but we look forward to speaking about those chapters in forthcoming events, including the one that Kasia has organized at PRIO. The link is in the chat. I wanted to also thank the Refugee Research Network and Susan McGrath for all of her years of support. This partially came out of a very early grant from the RRN, but also for coming today and for your remarks. And finally, last but not least, the LERRN team, Richard, Rachel, Nadia, and James Milner, who is here and will close out the session.
Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone from unceded Algonquin territory here in Ottawa, Canada. We are at time, but just a few quick words to conclude. First of all, a sincere thanks to Christina and Katya and all of the speakers. A special thanks to Susan and Nicole for navigating those technical difficulties. It takes a global village to put on an event like this, let alone to bring a book like this to fruition, and the joy and sincerity with which this event has been put together has been just amazing. So thank you to everyone for staying up very late, getting up very early in the morning and doing this. I want to echo Christina's thanks to the team at LERRN who's worked behind the scenes to make this possible, and will continue to work with the production of a recording of this event. So to Rachel McNally and Richard and everyone at the LERRN team, my thanks to you. Thank you to colleagues at the RRN for your ongoing collaboration with this webinar and with this webinar series. This is the latest installment in a series that we're planning this year that looks at these questions of ethical and methodological challenges in the work that we do. There are at least 2 more webinars in the series, so stay tuned. Our next webinar will look at questions of power and structures within which forced migration research takes place. And we will have a webinar on the 11th of March looking at critical issues of positionality. Let me note that what we're doing in this webinar series is part of a much broader effort within refugee and forced migration studies to ask very critical questions. In the chat box, I've just posted 2 upcoming deadlines. One is the call for submissions to IASFM for their conference in early August, which will be virtual. These questions of decolonizing refugee and forced migration studies is front and center in that call. I'd encourage you to consider that. Likewise, a special issue of forced migration review that is looking at questions of knowledge, voice, and power that has a deadline for submissions, as you know, with FMR, shorter submissions in the 12 to 1800 word range. That deadline is the 15th of February. So thank you everyone for participating. We're 3 minutes past time, so I'll be uncharacteristic and keep it brief. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone, wherever you are. Stay well, stay safe, and thank you for engaging with this conversation. We look forward to continuing this conversation in the next webinar. Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup. Bye for now.